Welcome to My Dental Hygiene School Experience, hosted by Dach Ska. The world of hygiene school can be wild. Hold on to your toothbrushes because we're going to dive into the chaos right now.
Welcome everyone. I am Dach Ska, dental assistant, dental hygiene student, and future hygienist. And yes, I haven't been putting out a lot of episodes lately. Actually, none, because I'm in school and I'm busy. So I'll be giving more episodes once I complete the semester, just so that way I don't have to split my focus. But there are more episodes coming. But today I have something a little bit different for you. I have an interview with Tammy. She's one of my followers on Instagram, and she joined me for an interview. So just as simple as that. And it's a little bit long. I try to keep my episodes under an hour, but I thought this one was really interesting, and it's good to hear someone else's perspective. So without further ado, let's get in with the interview. All right, so we have a guest on today. We have Tammy, and Tammy, tell us about yourself, where you're at in your journey, and kind of what brought you to dental hygiene.
Hi, well, as you said, my name is Tammy. I've actually been in the dental field since 2003, and I just knew it was something that I always wanted to do. By me going to have my teeth cleaned, and I was always very picky and very interested in what was the doctor's job to do and what was the hygienist's job. I just learned that there were two different people, and that was like, wow, I want to do one of those. But anyway, I started doing dental assisting, and I love it. I still love it. So, but I do want to take it a little further. I want to do hygiene. But I've been doing assisting for a while, and it's kind of like, I don't want to say that there's a cap, and you can't go any further, because I know a lot of assistants go up to doing the office managing work, and they do a lot of great things, but I want to go like even above that. So, and a lot of my friends are like, well, you should do nursing, or you should, but I know where my heart is, and I wouldn't be able to give that my all. And I've been in dentistry my whole life, literally my whole life. So why would I want to switch and start all over in a new field that I have no clue about? So yeah, it started
Cool. Yeah. Well, the nice thing about the dental journey, it's different for everyone, and there's no wrong way to do it. So, you were a dental assistant for a long time. Same with me. I even left the dental field for a little while before I came back. And when I came back, that's when I decided I'm going to be serious about this, go further than assisting. And so that's how I ended up in hygiene school.
I have been, I'm from the South, so I'm going to say what really grinds my gears, okay, is throughout my dental assisting, I have had a few hygienists say, I would just kind of ask, well, how is it? Is it hard or whatever, and they're like, yeah, it's hard. I wouldn't do it if I were you. I would pick something different or whatever, and I think that is not fair to a lot of assistants, because a lot of assistants do end up making really good dental hygienists. And I don't like when they say that. I'm a motivator. Like, I help people. I've trained so many dental assistants. To this day, I have some of them still call me, like, several times. She called me, she's like, hey, we have a set of dentures and I got to adjust them, and I'm so scared. I don't want to take off too much. And I'm like, always start little, because you can't put it back, just go slow and low is what we always do. That way you can adjust it properly. So I love teaching. So that brings me to what I want to do after hygiene. I want to get my bachelor's. That's actually what came in today's my statistics book.
Nice.
So, goodness gracious, what did I sign up for? But I'm ready. So, but it's good to motivate people. While I was going back to say that the hygienist would say, oh, you don't want to do it, you don't want to do it. But I don't think they should say that. I think they should say it's a challenge, but, give it a try.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good point to bring up, because a lot of people are like, oh, you couldn't handle it. And it's like, okay, how well do they really know you? That's the first question. Second of all, it's not their call to say that.
Yeah.
And, I agree with you. I think that's unfair because how many times does that happen where someone's like, maybe I won't go to hygiene school when they could have gone to hygiene school and become awesome hygienists?
Yep. That was almost me. It was almost one good doctor friend of mine. I worked with him for a while, and he's like, "You would do actually a really good job being a hygienist." I'm like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, because um, one, I'm not intimidated very easily by anybody, and two, I'm a self starter. I always just go. I don't care. Like, because my mom taught me that why let fear hold you back? Like, I was so afraid when I got out of school. I was like, oh my gosh, tomorrow's my day to actually sit and assist. And I am terrified. And she says, of what? Well, I don't know. I'm just scared. She was like, just do it. Get in there. Do it. What's going to happen? If you don't know how to do something, tell them. Say, hey, can you help me with this? I don't know how to do it. And she's like, if they can't realize that you're new, then that's not the place for you to be. And I was like, that's true. So, yeah, I stood by that. And I was like, you know what? Why am I scared? I'm not going to be scared because if I don't know it, then I'm going to ask someone, how do I do it? So.
Yeah, and how do you know unless you ask?
Yeah, but now I'm not intimidated by doctors. I make a lot of friends with doctors now, I think because they see that, and I've had my fair share of bad doctors. So that's one. I've seen a doctor be very aggressive with one assistant before, and I was like, I don't want to be that assistant. I don't want to be in my car crying, and I don't want to let the doctor make me to where I start disliking my career, like I didn't want that. So I always stood up for myself.
Good. That's awesome. Yeah, I think that's very important because although a lot of times, especially in private practice, the doctor's your boss, and so you have to do
Yeah.
what they say, but that doesn't give them the right to say whatever they want. You still have to maintain boundaries and
Yes.
say, this is not okay, for certain things. Of course, if it's like you need to start sterilizing instruments and you say no, that's a different
Well,
story. But yeah.
yeah. So I like to do my own instruments. I have one doctor, he'll try to come in and he's like trying to do stuff. And it's like, what did you do? Like, you have all these kits all mixed up. And I was like, stay, just leave my lab alone, please. Stay. I don't know if
Yeah.
you've ever had that problem, but I have had them, like the doctor come in and he's like, well, you weren't here yet. And it's not my time to be here. Like, just leave my lab alone. I'll do my.
Right. So tell me, I'm not sure if you said this in your introduction, but where are you in the process of hygiene school, becoming hygienist?
Right now, I have A&P 1 and 2, and I have microbiology and chemistry, and that's it. But I took the English, the algebra, I took all those classes, and I'm taking diet and nutrition, statistics. There's a few classes that kind of, that's not necessary for my associate's degree. However, I want to be able to, I say, easily transition into trying to do my bachelor's as soon as I'm finished with my associates. And so by me having a good bit of those classes already, taken care of, I won't have as much on my plate to do. So I can apply to the program and at the end of 26.
Okay.
Well, yeah, around I think the middle of the end of 26, and I just planned this out last night, and I was like, oh, okay, I could do that, but I think it may be sooner depending on if I take A&P 1 and 2 with a chemistry, in which I'm scared because I don't know. I've heard horror stories, so I'm like, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if I could do this, but I mean, you never know unless you try, right?
Right. And, it's good to kind of look at your plan. I mean, you're early on in your journey, but, that's okay
Yeah,
because you got to start somewhere. So it's good
yeah,
that you're looking forward, looking at different options because, I know someone I used to work with, she's in hygiene school right now too, at a different school. And she was taking the prereqs, but she was, she had a full life. She was working full time and all that. So she's kind of taking the slow road. And so, instead of taking, 3 or 4 classes, she was just taking like 1 or 2. And, that works for her. And now she's in hygiene school and she's on her way to becoming a hygienist. So
that's good. I think you.
there's many different ways to go about
Yeah.
it.
I think Well, I just started off with 2 classes because it had been a while since I graduated high school. So I was like, oh,
Yeah.
this is going to be a bit much. But, I said, well, I'm just going to do it. And so I did. I was like, okay, that wasn't that bad at all. I can do that. And then I noticed like my max is going to be like 4 classes. I don't want to like do so much to where are you really absorbing that information? Are you really understanding it and retaining it for,
Right.
future classes and stuff? And now I understand music may not be in dental hygiene at all, but I still did my best in that class and I got an A. So far
Awesome.
I have 4.0 and I'm doing really good.
Awesome.
I'm,
That's really good to hear.
yeah, that's what I want to keep too. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So I was on the president's list this last semester and I'm like, all right, let me add another class and then I'm going to see if I can do this. But we're selling our house. So I'm like, okay, can I do this? Can I do all these classes, maintain my 4.0 and move across the country? I don't know, but we're going to see. We're going to
Oh,
do
you're
it.
moving across the country, not just in town.
Well, yeah, we're moving from Georgia to Colorado.
Okay.
Yeah, it was going to be Texas, but my husband got a job in Colorado. We'll transfer it over there because he works at 2 different universities right now. He does work from home. So
Okay.
lucky. But, I guess that's the benefit of it is we can move wherever, So that's good.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. Now, as I told you before we started the interview, I didn't prepare any questions. So I'm just kind of off the cuff here. But is there anything in hygiene school that you're looking forward to learning about?
Actually, I'm looking forward to learning like the instruments and probing because I see them. I don't know what they are. I know so far I know that I guess the longer shank ones are for the posterior, the shorter shank are for the anterior. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know. This is just word of mouth from another assistant, so it's not been confirmed.
Yeah.
Maybe you could tell me if that's true.
Well, yeah, I know for the probes that we use, we have 2 different kinds in our kit, and they're both kind of about the same size, the UNC and the marquee probe. The only thing that's different is the markings on it. So I'm sure we've talked about it in class, but the things for me don't really stick unless we use them. Like in the earlier semesters, we had learned about some instruments, and it's like, well, you want to use this one for this situation, but for this situation, use that one. And, that didn't stick with me. But now that I'm working with patients, I'm like, yeah, no, I definitely want to do that. So,
Okay, you can see where they're falling into
yeah.
place. Like, okay, I need this because I'm not going to be able to get it with this. Okay.
Yeah. Especially early on, I wouldn't be too hard on yourself about not trying to remember every single detail because the important things you'll go back to. And so, like, let's see, I'm trying to think of an example. I don't know. Like, okay, so tooth anatomy, that's a good example. So in my first semester, I had dental anatomy. So we learn about each kind of tooth. And so, there's incisors, you've got your canine, your premolars, your molars, and like how each one, so like the top are different than the bottom. You learn different things about it. But it's like in my first semester, I was like, I don't know, I'm not going to remember all this. And then one thing I do remember from the very first semester was how I think it's the first maxillary premolar, I believe it's on the mesial side, there's a concavity. And so when the patient is flossing, they could be doing an amazing job flossing, but no matter how hard they floss, it's never going to reach that concavity. And so they said when you're scaling, that's one place you want to pay a little extra attention to. Like when you have your instrument, you want to turn it in a little bit more. And so that's one thing I actually remembered, of all the things I forgot. But it's actually like been very helpful knowing that because, when I see a patient, like especially the first few times where I actually missed that area because I had to remember it. And the instructor's like, oh, yeah, there's a piece right there. How did you miss that? And I'm like, I don't know. And then they're like, okay, let's see what you're doing. Oh, turn in the toe just a little bit more. There we go. And, there's a lot to be said for hands-on practicing and like learning.
So, do the instructors kind of like, do they hover over you to watch you?
Yes.
Like during the whole.
So not the whole time. So the way it works in my school, we have groups. We call them blocks. And so there will be one instructor for maybe 4 or 5 students. And it depends on your class size too. It can vary. So for clinic or when we're doing lab stuff, the instructor will go around, or you sign up and they'll come to you when you're at that point in the list. So like you're saying, okay, well, I want to do competency for one of my instruments. And, there's limitations because the human mouth is only so big.
Yeah.
So to see exactly what they need to see, they have to, their head's like right beside yours. So they're pretty much breathing in and out of your ear. And, I remember one of my first competencies that I did. I was like, I feel pretty confident. Like, I just learned how to use whatever it was, probably the Explorer. And I was like, I think I got this, I feel pretty good. And then the instructor comes along and she's like, okay, let's start. And then she like puts her head like right by my ear. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is intimidating, But the thing is, at the beginning, it's intimidating. It's weird because it's like you're kind of in my bubble, but there's a point where you get used to it, and maybe not used to it, but it doesn't bother you nearly as much. And so I remember this past semester, like we do competencies over and over again, but each semester the bar is raised so we can make fewer and fewer mistakes. And so I had an Explore competency this past semester, or the semester that I'm in now, and I remember I had I seem to remember I hadn't used the Explorer. I think I'd been doing a lot of like exams and stuff like that, so I hadn't been using the Explorer, and so I was like a little out of practice. And I felt like I practiced for about 5 minutes, and I was like, yeah, I think I remember how to use this. And so you have to do 2 posterior teeth and 2 anterior teeth to show, because the technique is quite different. And I just did it, and it was fine. And the instructor was right there watching me, and it didn't bother me. So there's a lot of interesting things that I've noticed about the program. Because in your mind, you're like, I'm here to learn about dental health, things to recommend to my patients, how to use your instruments, all that kind of stuff. But one thing that you do get out of it is you learn to think more critically. And so, before, like maybe I'd read something on a website and they're like, oh, this nutrient is really good for you. You should really try and get a lot of it because it helps with this. And I'd be like, oh yeah. And, I'd be looking up supplements online or something, but then after we do like papers, and so we have to find credible sources for the information. And after doing a few of those, it kind of like clicks where you're like, this is how I should be approaching things in real life. And so when I see something online, they're like, oh yeah, definitely check this out. This is, the greatest thing ever. And I start looking into it, and I don't just look at like, what are the benefits or where can I find it? I'm also looking, what are the downsides, or, is this even credible at all? And, sometimes it's not. And it's shocking how much misinformation is on the internet. And like, I saw a video today where someone was saying something, and I was looking through all the comments, and a lot of people were like, wow, that's amazing. Like just everything in support of it. And then I'm like trying to find someone being critical of it. And then finally someone's like, that's not true. And I'm like, finally, someone who has a brain.
Yeah.
So you learn to think more critically. You learn to stand up to pressure. Like a lot of the instructors will be intense. And I think part of it is, I think maybe it could be just their personality. But the other part of it is, when you're working out in the field, you're going to be in a fast-paced environment. You need to be able, like, sometimes you'll talk to the doctor and you're like, I think this patient needs this. And the doctor's like, why would you need that? And just because the doctor's questioning you doesn't mean that they're right. So you need to be able to immediately be like, well, I see this sign, this sign, this sign. That equals they are a good candidate for this treatment. So there's a lot that you learn from it that you don't really learn from a book. And like, you could read all the hygiene books in the world. None of them are going to teach you that stuff. So there's a lot that you get out of it, not just book education, but stuff that even carries over to other parts of your life.
Yeah. Do you guys have, like when I had to do my expanded functions exams, I don't know, you probably don't know him. His name is Dr. Joe Hare. He's a really good doctor, well known here on the South Side. And I had to go to West Georgia Technical College to get my extended functions. And so I thought that I was just going to do it, turn in the work and say, okay, here, I did this base, this liner, I did this perio dressing, whatever. No, when I went in there, we all had our seat and we all like had to perform that in front of him. He was walking by and he would stand right in front of you and look down and watch you do it. He'll tell you, okay, do perio dressing on the lower right, lower left, whatever. And I'm like, I was so afraid.
Yeah.
My hand was shaking. And I shook his like, take your time, I'll come back to you. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, wait, that's a bad thing that he did that. Oh my gosh, no, I should have never did that. And I was just like, just thinking the worst, about every little detail. But he actually said that you did really well. He said you just need to stop being so afraid.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm not really afraid to do it. I was very confident in how to do those because I had practice at my office. But I guess it was just like someone of like a higher authority kind of like watching me do it. And I'm like, what are they thinking? Are they thinking, God, this girl's an idiot? Or you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
so, but I did really well. And that was so many years ago. And now I'm like, I did pretty good. When you more experience you have personally and you work with patients day in and day out, and you're like, I did really good on that base and that liner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And something else to think about too, and I know I kind of mentioned this a little bit, doctors aren't always right. They are highly educated. They worked very hard to get where they're at, and I can appreciate that. But, they are humans. They are prone to make mistakes, maybe not as often as an assistant or hygienist, but still, they're human. And so I remember I was working, this is when I was on my 1-year break from hygiene school, and I was working in an endo office, and we were just having a day where we were like, there's only 2 of us. Normally there would be like 3 or 4 of us. And so the schedule was still the same. So we were just like, at the very end of the day, that's when we could actually do our notes. And so we're just trying to bust them out as quick as we could. And, but during the day, I guess the doctor said, I'll try and like take care of the notes or, as much as I can. But, she's also very busy. So she recognized that she wanted to help us out. And she recognized that, we were going to drown if we didn't have that help. So we appreciate that. But then the other assistant I was working with, she's like, well, yeah, you should just, like look over the notes, make sure that they look good. And I was like, oh no, doctor took care of it. And she's like, well, it's still a good idea to look over it just to make sure that's thorough. I'm like, no, I mean the doctor, like she took care of it. It's all good. And then the doctor was actually in the next room over, but she could hear what was going on. And she's like, I think what she's trying to tell you is she wants to make sure I didn't make a mistake, And I was like, oh, okay. I'm like, but you're the doctor. Like, I guess at some point I kind of was given the impression like, oh, the doctor, like, don't. And I worked for a doctor kind of like that too, where it's like, don't cross them because, but the thing is, like, I was lucky enough that the doctors I did work with were actually quite humble and like, if they made a mistake, they'd be like, yeah, I'm sorry about that. And, they'd fix it, whatever. So it's just kind of funny, like kind of shifting that thought process. And yes, the doctor can make a mistake. And, so one thing I'm learning too is that doctors are trained in a lot of things. And so in their time in school, they're learning pretty much everything. But with hygiene, like our scope of practice is smaller, but we also, for certain aspects of it, we go deeper into it. And so like we may be more familiar with the perio aspect of it. Maybe the doctor got the same training, but, they did that and then they moved on. And so there's sometimes where a hygienist may be able to identify something that a doctor would completely miss. And also like we're the eyes of the doctor too sometimes, like they're only in with the patient for 5 minutes sometimes. So they're trying to get an overall assessment of what they're looking at, but it helps the doctor a lot if you're able to say like, okay, looks like there might be some decay on the distal of, 29, maybe on the pocket of the lingual pocket of number 18, they could use some Arrestin, stuff like that, and then they'll be like looking at it and they're like, yeah, I agree with that. And so that way the patient gets the care they need and it doesn't make the doctor look bad because we're just pointing it out to them.
So, like, I know how I interact with my doctor now as an assistant. He's very laid back. I mean, I don't work currently, but before I put in my 2 weeks, he was upset. He's a sweet doctor. And I know how I approach him as far as things with the patient. You'd say, "Hey, this patient, she needs a filling on these teeth, and when do you want to do it or whatever?" And he makes the plan. We go put in the treatment plan, whatever. So as a hygienist, like, is it kind of similar where you sit there and you say, "Okay, this person needs an SRP"? Do you say that person needs an SRP, or does the doctor come in and diagnose and say, "Yes, this person needs an SRP"? That's been a question of mine for a minute. So
Yeah.
you can answer it.
Well, I can tell you about my experience in school. Like, I'm still in school. So right now what we do is we go through like a whole bunch of exams, and we use that to create, not really, I don't want to say diagnosis, because as hygienists, we don't diagnose. We can identify signs. And so it's important how you word things. So you don't say you see caries. You can say, "I see a carious lesion on the distal of 29. And then the doctor can look at it. They're the ones that make the final call on that. In terms of the perio, though, the way it works right now is with my instructor, after I do all my exams, like we take like perio readings, we look at radiographic bone loss, we detect calculus. And so we use all that to determine what their case type is. And so I don't know if this is how broad this is, but in terms of like, is it in other states? But we do the stage and grade, which I think is pretty standard across the US. And so it determines how much calculus they have. So like, what category are they? Light, periolight, local generalized, moderate, or heavy. So you'll kind of learn about those. And then also age and grade, the potential for future bone loss. So do they have bone loss? Is it progressing? Yeah, so and then there's also like another system, and that's more like for insurance. And that one is, gosh, I'm off school. I'm on break right now. So my brain's just like, oh yeah, I remember school.
Yeah.
There's like another system that I use, but it's not really, it's to satisfy the insurance requirements, but it's not something we really use. And so I think I'm mixing those two up, actually. See, my brain's really on vacation right now. But so once I have the instructor like look over everything, and she asked me, "Okay, so what are you categorizing this patient as?" And so I'll be like, "Oh, this is light 3." And they'll either say they agree with me or they don't. And if it's anything LG or above, light generalized, then they'll have a second instructor look at it. If it's light, one instructor is like, "Yeah, that's fine. Just go for it." So yeah, I guess I don't know yet because I haven't worked in a dental office, but at least in school, this is how it works.
I'm excited overall to learn, like I've said before, I'm kind of scared a little bit because just of the horror stories. People are like, "Oh, you don't want to do it," but at the same time, you don't know unless you start to do it. So that's when I was like, yeah, I'm gonna start asking questions to different hygienists. Some of them get back to me. Like, sometimes I'll reach out to a couple in the Facebook group, and ask, like, "Hey, But I know a lot of times some of them don't get back because, like, when I look up a question in there, it's probably like from a post a long time ago. So it's like, man. But yeah. So I'm excited, but yeah, really nervous about it.
Yeah, and that's understandable. Like, this is like the next step in the rest of your life kind of thing.
Yeah.
But also keep this in mind. This is something I've had to learn is, so there's going to be a lot of ups and downs in hygiene school. That's to be expected.
Yeah.
But just having one bad exam, one bad quiz or whatever, don't freak out about it. Like, especially if you're like early on in the semester, you're like, so for my head and neck class, when I was in semester 2, our first exam, I think only like 2 or 3 people passed out of like 18, 19 people. And it was like, oh my gosh, like I really got to buckle down and like learn this stuff. Like I thought I knew it, but when you get tested on it and there's a lot of like fill in the blank stuff, like it can be intense. And so, but the thing is, like, I think having like not passing that first exam kind of like made my brain click, like, oh, like I need to like focus on this. Like, I think the first exams that you have in each class kind of help you identify which class you're doing better in and which classes you need to spend more time on.
Yeah.
And, but like I still passed the semester,
Yeah.
there's some classes where even like throughout the whole thing, I was like, oh my gosh, like my biomaterials class. And the first time when I went through it, I was like, so the thing is, like biomaterials, that's when we were doing our first fillings. I don't know if in your state, I don't think they do fillings.
We can do bases and liners, but we
Okay.
don't.
Okay. So in Washington State, we place composite fillings and amalgam fillings.
Oh, okay.
So the doctor preps the tooth and we fill it. So that semester in biomaterials, we were doing amalgam. But like that's one small aspect of the class. We're also learning to do bleach trays. We're doing I don't know, there's a whole bunch of stuff. So there's one thing about classroom learning that's awesome. Like sometimes you could be amazing at that, but then trying to do amalgam fillings like that, I almost didn't pass the semester because of that alone. And I worked really hard and I had so many that didn't pass. Like you have certain requirements you have to meet. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to make it. And then I turn around and I'm like, oh, and then head and neck. I'm like, oh, I'm not doing as well. You just kind of like go around in a circle. But the thing is like, it's important to not get worked up about it because, when you get in that anxiety state, your logical brain turns off and you're just kind of in panic mode. And yeah, so I had a quiz where I didn't pass it, like I got, 3 out of 10 or whatever, like terrible. It happens, for certain, like, especially with quizzes, like sometimes even if you don't do well on a quiz, it doesn't always change your grade that much. And then focus on assignments because assignments you don't have to know the information off the top of your head. You have the book right there, or whatever the assignment is. That'll help you a lot. And the thing is like, keep a good attitude because I mean, I think the first time around I did kind of have a little bit of a bad attitude because we were having all these clinical requirements and, I'm like, this is like impossible. Like we only have 15 weeks to do, 20 requirements or whatever it was. I don't know. It was a lot. And, I was like, I don't see how this is possible. And, like we got through it and all that stuff, but
realistically, are we going to be able to do this and then retain it? That's my question. Like, I hear there's so much compact down and it's like, am I going to be able to retain this? Because I know there's like an exit exam. I know is that different from your boards?
Okay.
Okay, so, well, I know I've heard that some colleges have an exit exam, but that is on top of your boards exam. And I'm like, so as fast as they're going through these material, like, is one going to be able to retain it? Like, and it's so in depth and everything, because I don't know. Like, that's one of my worries. Like, am I going to be able to remember it for these? Like,
well, something I noticed was that the important stuff keeps coming back. So with my program, you do the prereqs in the program. And so we had AMP one day, and we're learning about like, I forget what it was, like one of the body systems. But anyway, but then we go into our dental hygiene class, and then we're also learning about the same system. And then we go into our dental anatomy, and like it touched on a few things there as well. And it's like, oh, so I'm learning the same material in different classes. So the nice thing is you only have to learn like this bit of information, and you can use it in 3 classes. The other thing I noticed later on in other semesters is that like we're doing, well, I don't know, like in perio class, we learned a few things in AMP and microbiology. That's another one that things keep coming back. And it's like, oh, I've learned about this before, but that should be a flag going off in your head saying, hey, pay attention to this. This is important.
Yeah. Okay.
And like even our dental hygiene class that I'm in semester 4 now, we're still talking about stuff that we learned about in perio last semester. And, and that's a nice thing, like the staging and grading, it keeps coming back. Like you're going to have to know it really well for boards. And then at the end, there is a class where it kind of takes everything you've learned and you basically review everything and get tested on it. And so I wouldn't say it's an exit exam, but it's it's just kind of to prep you for boards. Like they're trying to prepare you for it. And so I know at the beginning, like I know for me, so I hadn't been in school for 10 years when I went back to hygiene school. And I'm like, okay, well, I have to learn how to learn because
Yes.
learning is a skill separate from the material that you're learning. And so you have to learn like study habits and stuff like that. And so at the beginning, I feel like the first semester, maybe the second a little bit, I wasn't as disciplined. And so I learned discipline with studying. And it's like sometimes it can be just so painful to, it's like I'm not in the mood to study or whatever. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, but do you want to pass? Do you want your future? It's like, okay, like sometimes maybe it means taking a break, going for a walk, maybe having tea or something. I don't know, whatever works for you. But, identify those feelings, understand why you feel that way. And if you can't, that's okay too. But give yourself time to take a break and then come back to it. And then sometimes, when you're refreshed and, just got back from a walk or something, then you're like, okay, my brain's in a better place now. I can focus on this. So,
Are you able
yeah.
to are you able to like conveniently talk to your instructor like what like after hours, I guess, if you get stuck on something, because I know I had an English exam and it was due the next day, and I was reading the textbook and I'm like, I don't understand this. What is this? What is this telling me? What was it? I think it was modified danglers. I'm like, what is the modified dangler? Like, I have never in my life heard of this. And I'm asking, my friends, and they're like, I don't know, I've never heard of it. And I'm like, I didn't have clarification. And I know it was in one of the chapters that we were going to have our quiz on. And I was like, oh my God, I feel like I need to know all this. So I wasn't able to reach out to my instructor because of the after hours thing. How is that with hygiene? Do you always have someone that's available to, I mean, obviously not at 3 a.m, but you know
Right.
what I'm saying?
Yeah. So I know every school is different. For my school, the instructors are quite busy, so it's a challenge to find time to meet with them. But they're willing. It's just you got to find a time that your schedules line up. And so quite often, either after class or maybe send them an email and say, hey, I need help with this. Another option is talking to a classmate, just say, hey, so and so, do you understand this concept? I'm still trying to learn it. And if you both don't know, maybe learn together. Another good resource, your textbook. Sometimes I know for my classes, there's a lot of lectures, and so it's from the textbook, but you kind of get, sometimes it's not as detailed as the textbook. And so sometimes you go to the textbook and it just kind of lays everything out and you're like, okay, now I kind of get it.
Okay.
YouTube is another really good resource, but also use that with a grain of salt because I know, especially I was learning dose calculations for local anesthetic, and some of the information that they had on the videos, and I don't know if it's because it was an older video, but it wasn't the same as what I was learning.
Okay.
So you got to be careful with that kind of stuff. But like pharmacology, I know there's a few really good channels out there that not only explain what the drug is and how it works, but also ways to remember it. And I wish I could
Oh,
remember the name of the YouTube channel off the top of my head, but they kind of create a story. And so they kind of
okay.
use like symbols, like they use a tarantula for anything that's teratogenic, so anything that can cause birth defects. And so when the tarantula is in the story, you're like, okay, I'm going to
Oh,
remember that.
awesome.
So they create really good visuals. After the interview, I'll see if I can pull it up.
Yeah, I definitely would need that. I do mnemonics right now with stuff, like on how to remember stuff when I was in the algebra class, because that was a little tricky for me. 'Cause,
Yeah.
like, it's been a minute, and there's new math now, and it's like, I don't know this.
Yeah.
It really took a good bit. My instructor helped me a lot, and so now I know it. And like, I'm just looking through my statistics book, and I'm like, I don't remember this. So
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to learning it. But also, I do know flashcards help me. They help me a lot. But I'm also trying to really depend more on like my iPad and stuff. But it is hard for me to adjust to writing on an iPad and taking notes on it because I feel like I can just do it quicker, just pen and paper. I
Mm-hmm.
definitely, instead of like trying to maneuver through an iPad or whatever. Maybe I just need to do it more. I don't know. That's my next thing, is trying to just depend on the iPad. But I'm also afraid of that because people are like, oh, make sure you bring like a backup charger, because if it dies, all your stuff is there and you have none of your stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So, I mean, the thing is, you got to find what works for you. And so I have a classmate, and she literally will print up the lecture before we start. And she'll make notes right on paper, like everything's paper for her. And, if that helps her learn, then great. With the iPad, I have an iPad. I bought a Bluetooth keyboard to go with it because it's nice. It actually is like a case and keyboard all in one. And so, like, I kind of had the idea of like I was going to write everything down, but it's actually better for me to type it. But then there's some people that they're like, oh no, I really like to have my laptop. And for the iPad, I have bought a like portable battery charger, just bought off of Amazon. Nothing terribly expensive, but I just make sure that I charge it up every night. And then sometimes like I'm using my iPad a lot and I do need to charge it. At least I have the backup charger there. So just remembering to charge that as well.
yeah.
It's about being prepared.
I think it was you I watched on your Instagram. You were drawing the tooth anatomy or
Oh
whatever.
yeah,
I was like,
that was a
that is
while ago.
so awesome. Like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. And I was like, oh, I could never. I could never.
Well, I'm not really an artist, but that was semester one. And so we had to draw certain teeth. And, it took me like hours. Like, I think when I actually did the one that I posted online, it was probably like my third one. So I kind of like had narrowed
Oh,
down the process a bit. But honestly, there's a point where I talked to other classmates and they're like, oh yeah, I spent like 3-4 hours just making this one tooth. And then there's something that occurred to me is, the teacher didn't say we couldn't trace it. And so I think on the last one I did something like that where I had like the picture and then I had like the overlay of like a different layer that I was drawing on. And it's, like
you
yeah,
found
the
the
idea is that you're getting an idea of the anatomy of the tooth.
yeah,
And so you're still drawing it, and it's not like drawing it is going to,
yeah,
make it solidified in your
yeah,
mind. But, for me, that was semester one. So over time, like, it's just getting more and more exposure to it.
yeah. I know when I was in dental assisting, my dental assisting program was a year and 3 months. What we had to do 2 months externship.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and we had to, the teacher came around and she gave us like this block of wax, and it was just a square block of wax, and she's like, I need you to mold um a premolar and a molar out of this. And I was like, oh no. And we're like, okay, well, how? And she's like, you cannot carve it. And I was like, how am I gonna do it and not carve this? This is insane. This lady's lost her mind. Then I figured it out. Like, a lot of us figured out how to do it. We were like trying to push and mold it, but it was, hard. So we sat on it and warmed up the wax and we
Well,
molded.
whatever works.
Yeah, whatever works. And we was rubbing it and we put it like we sat down on it and kind of warmed it up and we molded the teeth out of it. And it worked really well. But I feel like I could do that better hands on than just actually drawing out teeth. So I'm like, if they ask me like, hey, I can make you one out of wax, is that okay?
Well, yeah, and talk to your instructor, maybe if they do assign to draw it, you could do that as an alternative. Like maybe it's just never been an option, or
Yeah.
they just never thought of it before.
Yeah. It was we got creative. I do know you have to get creative though. You really.
Yeah, creativity really helps, and critical thinking, like you will develop that whether you want it or not. But when you learn how to use a critical thinking, um, I mean, things change for you. It kind of opens up your eyes, like, oh, this isn't working. Okay, well, let's assess the situation here. Why is it not working? Okay, what could I do instead that will work? And if maybe it's a little bit of trial and error. And, it goes slow at first where you spend a lot of time thinking, a lot of time assessing, but over time you speed up because you're like, oh, I've been in this situation before. I just got to do this. Something else I did want to mention too, because you have a dental assisting background. So one thing I ran into, especially in my second semester, or I guess it was third semester, there's some aspect of, because you have a dental background, you feel like certain skills and I'm thinking specifically of instrumentation,
Okay.
you feel like it should just come naturally to you. And it doesn't. And then it gets frustrating when you're like, but I've been in the dental field for 10 years. Like, how does this not, how am I not getting this? You know, one thing that the instructors say that I don't like, but I kind of agree with at the same time is that a dental hygiene is completely different than assisting.
Yes.
And so I think sometimes it's hard to see that at first because you're like, well, I know how to use a mirror. I know how to use this. I know how to use that. And it's easy, you know? Yeah, because I ran into that in that one semester, and the instructor told me it's actually pretty common. People who are dental assistants, they think I should just know how to do this. I mean, there are some skills where dental assisting, I mean, it's pretty much the same. Although I do have to say, X-rays, I thought I used to be good at them, and then I came to hygiene school, and I was like, oh no, 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 you know.
Oh, that.
But the thing is, you learn to do it the right way. I'm not saying that the way
Yeah.
dental assistants do it are wrong, but I think we're given more insight onto how to get a better X-ray, how to kind of set yourself up to get it the first or maybe second shot as opposed to like 3, 4, 5, you know. So there's a lot that you kind of need to adjust your thinking about. It kind of bothered me that they said dental assisting is completely different than hygiene. And it's like, yes, but there are some things like tooth numbers. Obviously, I know tooth numbers, you know, like, but they do want to drill that into your mind really early on because you need to be open to learning things a new way. And so like with taking the x-rays, like I mentioned, I just remember there are some shots, like specific situations that I remember from being a dental assistant where I took an image and I had the doctor look at it and I'm like, is that okay? And the doctor's like, yeah, that's fine. And thinking about it now, I'm like, that was not fine. Like, it's like, I don't know if the doctor was just like annoyed and just like, I just want to get this over with. Like, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a different way of thinking. Don't discount your dental assisting experience, but be open and willing to learn things differently than how you originally learned them.
Yeah, I originally started x-rays like the old school way, like dipping it in the
Oh,
developer
wow.
fixer and the water. And I was like, oh my gosh. So do they not teach you that way in dental school, right? Is it all digital?
So we use the ScanX system, so it's partially digital. And so you still have like the films that you take x-rays with, but then you scan them into a machine and then they're digital. Okay. But that is my school. I mean, we do have digital sensors as well, but they're only in a few ops, and each sensor is like $7,000 to $10,000 each. So it's like they're not going to buy them for the whole clinic. Some schools are different. Like some schools are like, you know, top of the line. You'll go to different schools and they use different programs. We use EagleSoft, and I don't think anyone really likes it, but it's what we use.
I'm a Dentrix girl.
Yeah, Dentrix. I learned on Dentrix, and so
Yes,
in most offices are Dentrix. So like EagleSoft is like, oh, this is so annoying.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
But you know, but the thing is, like, it's good to have the broad experience as well because you know, if you're temping, you're going to go in an office. They're using open. What do they call it? Open Office or something.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
The next one's going to use Dentrix. The next one's going to use EagleSoft, and then the next one's going to use something completely different. So you have to be able to adapt, and you know, because if we only use Dentrix, you know, one day you'll go to an office and you're like, no, like this is I don't know how to do this because it's, you know, everything's brand new.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a very important skill to have, even with like. When you're in school, different instructors, like you'll learn like some instructors, they focus on certain things. And so like they could be very lenient, but then there's one aspect where it's like, you better get that right. But then there's another instructor will be like, oh, you forgot that? Let's just do it real quick now. Just get it next time. And they won't mark you down for it.
I hope those instructors. I hope for them.
But see, the thing is, what I've noticed too is like learning the different styles, like it kind of keeps you sharp. Because they're not trying to break you down, if that makes sense. Like they're just trying to I'm trying to think of the right way to phrase this, but they're trying to,
I guess, make you stronger.
make you stronger, make you more on your toes.
Yeah.
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 But then it's like you'll work with doctors and it'll be the same thing, like
Yeah.
some of them will be like, whatever. Or another one will be like, you didn't do that? Like, how dare you,
Yeah.
So,
So do you
yeah.
have do they time you like when I know I heard another girl on her podcast say that when they take a FMX, they time you on mounting them. And I'm like, I'm a pro at that. So I'm good. But then I'm like, wait, maybe they want it a certain way. Maybe I'm not a pro. Oh my gosh. Like, so I just start second guessing myself. I do know I have to, I guess, unlearn certain things.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to prepare myself. Like, and I know you never truly are prepared. You're going to get stuff that's thrown at you like, I did not expect this. But I guess, because I know when you get out of dental assisting, in dental assisting, you're timed on taking the x-rays and everything. And when you get out, I went to a private practice, so we wasn't really timed on it. But then I go into corporate and it's like, you're timed. You have to do your FMX, you have to do your intraoral camera, you have to put in your notes, your vital signs, you have to do all that like within a certain amount of time. Is it the same way in clinic? Would you guys have your time to do all that?
Yeah. So basically everything's timed. When you are in your first semester where you see patients, the time is pretty generous. I mean, like for me, a lot of my appointments are 3 hours long. I may see a patient, depending on their case type, like if they're a light, I may see them 4 or 5 appointments, maybe 6, like 6 is like getting up there. Like you don't want to do more than 6, but it depends. Like I know different schools have different requirements too. Like for my school, we do a lot of paperwork. And so that does take a lot of time. But use your time wisely too. Yes, there's things you have to do in clinic that involve the patient, but there's paperwork that you can do outside of clinic. So if you can contact your patient ahead of time and say, hey, can I get your medication list? I need this information, this information. Not everyone can do it, but if you have a patient they're taking like 20 medications, you're going to want to do that outside of clinic time. But in terms of like clinical skills, you are timed on it. So like it should take you, this amount of time in this semester to do an FMX. But next semester, it'll be a little bit less, a little bit less. When you're scaling, scaling is a big one. You're definitely timed on that. So I know for us, like we have so there's like the first half of the semester and the second half of the semester. And so sometimes they're graded slightly differently. And so the second half, the margin may go down just slightly.
Okay.
So like, if you're doing a periolite, maybe you get 100 minutes, but then in the second half of the semester, maybe it's down to 90 or 80 or whatever it is. This is all building towards working in a dental office where you have 1 hour to do all this stuff. And so a lot of it would be in your head. So like kind of assessing like, okay, they have generalized 5mm pockets with this stuff, this stuff, this stuff, instead of like, because right now we just fill out everything, we create a care plan. So it's like, okay, they have this problem, it's caused by this. What is our goal? How are we going to accomplish that? And so maybe it's teaching them how to properly brush their teeth, which we do that. I pretty much do that for every single one of my patients because you'd be surprised how a lot of people may brush their teeth twice a day and they're very diligent about it, but their technique just needs some fine tuning. And so it's like, oh, why don't we just, or if you have a patient who has braces, you want to teach them a different technique because they need to make sure that they're getting around the brackets, and maybe offer different tools for them as well. So yeah, but I mean, all that's done in your head as opposed to like having to write down every single thing. So, I mean, everything's timed. I don't think the timing is unreasonable, but I do sometimes feel like the case that I have can be extra difficult. But then there's other factors. Like there's this one patient where I was scaling them. I'm like, I just don't feel like I'm really doing what I'm supposed to. Then I found out later, I was using my instruments and I was like, oh my gosh, these things are so dull. Like, no wonder I can't get anything done. So sharpening your instruments is huge. And I probably don't give myself enough time. But the thing is, you'll learn this in dental hygiene classes, that having sharp instruments It's more comfortable for the patient. It's easier on your hands. It's faster, because if it's dull, I mean, you could leave behind calculus and you won't be able to tell. And then also you're wearing out your wrist, repeated the same stroke over again instead of having to, just would have got it after a couple tries. So yeah. And the thing is, like you're saying, nothing can really prepare you for hygiene school. I thought I was going to be like amazing in hygiene school, where I was going to be like, they're going to ask the question. I'm like, I know. And the instructor's like, why don't we give someone else a chance to answer the questions? After like a week of being in hygiene school, I was like, oh, that's not the situation at all. And like some people, they're like, oh, I want to go through hygiene school with a 4.0. Like, I want to, be the best of the best. But the thing is, like, yes, you can do that, and some people can, but it's very tough. The other thing is, when you get a test back, like say you take an exam, and you're like, oh my gosh, like I didn't get a A on this exam. Like, it's gonna like crush you and cause emotional distress, which you don't need any extra emotional distress in hygiene school. Like, they'll take care of that for you. Yeah. And the thing is, like, when you get out in the real world, from what I hear, no doctor's can ask, what was your GPA? Because I mean, some people, like book work, they can do 4.0, no problem. But you sit them down in a dental chair and it's like, okay, well, now let's put that to practice. And all of a sudden they're like, they like don't have the same confidence, or they just can't deliver on that. And so the thing is, like, for me, like, I'm just happy if I pass. That's all I'm, like, that's the relief for me. And if I do really well, I mean, this is something I've said on the podcast many times, celebrate the little wins. Like, you passed a quiz that counts for like 1% of your grade. I mean, yes, like, say, go me, that's because, there's not always going to be times where you're feeling great about how you're doing in hygiene school. You're going to, I mean, I can't tell you how many times, like, it depends on the day, really. Am I going to pass this semester? I don't know. And then there are other days where I'm like, I got this. And the next day, oh no, it's not going to work out. And, don't focus on the day to day when it comes to how you feel about things. I mean, you've got your eyes on the prize. There's the RDH that you're going towards. Yeah. And so you have some good days, you have some bad days, but you got to focus on those little wins, because, like, you did an observation, the instructor said, good job. Like, some instructors don't say good job all the time. Like, so if they say good job, be like, wow, thank you.
I'm going to at least with Starbucks after this.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
I'm celebrating this.
And like, it doesn't even have to be like a tangible thing. Like, it's just like giving yourself a pat on the back, because
and that goes a long way too. It really does.
It does. Yeah. But I know people who are not in the hygiene program, like, so your friends and family, and they're like, oh, well, you've got this. And I can't tell you how many times I've had someone say that to me. And I almost want to tell them, you have no idea what it takes just to pass, like, just barely pass. And to say, oh, you got this, is so, like, to me, it's just like, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, I appreciate the support, and like, I would never tell anyone, don't say that, like, I would never say that, because they're trying to be supportive. They don't understand, but that's not their fault. They've never lived that experience. And so, friends or family, they're like, I'm proud of you, accept that, say thank you. But with your classmates, like, it's almost like a trauma bond where, you're all really tight knit because you're going through the same trauma together. But the thing is, you develop a stronger support system. So, I mean, the way I went into hygiene school, I'm like, it's a class of 20. So that means I get 19 new friends. Like, that's exciting, and honestly, like, when you're in hygiene school, I mean, work together as a team. Like, yes, definitely watch out for yourself. Make sure that you get your requirements. Make sure that, you're taken care of and you're not leaving yourself high and dry to help someone else out. But if, a classmate is struggling in an area where you're like, well, actually, I'm decent at this, like, work together with them. Or alternatively, if you're like struggling, or, like, with my first semester doing fillings, someone from another cohort was like, okay, let's meet at this time in the lab and we'll just do a filling real quick, and I'll kind of show you what I do and kind of give you some pointers. And even though, like, we didn't spend that much time on it, super helpful, and you learn to work with other cohorts, like, especially sharing patients. I mean, this semester, like, I'm struggling to find a mod patient, and I have one patient that I'm pretty sure will be a mod, but the thing is for them to find the time to come in,
Yeah.
it's, so it's like, so I'm like, I need a backup plan. And then there's open appointments I have right now. So I'm like, I got to fill those appointments. And, I've already seen too many patients of this category and, work together with the classmates. I mean, we've all created a chat group. And so people will just go to the chat group and like, say we're signing up for board exams that we're going to be taking soon. And someone's like, I'm signing up for this, but I'm getting stuck. Is anyone else having this problem? And of course, like someone's like, go here, send a screenshot, do that. Like, oh, there we go. And then I was like working through it and I'm like, oh, actually, I see this. I think that's where you're supposed to go. Like you work together, you're a team, don't put yourself out, but, be there for your classmates and they'll be there for you. And if you just kind of view it as like your class, you're just a group of friends. I mean, that'll make your hygiene experience so much better because I've heard of people in other classes where there's drama, people don't get along. And it's like, it kind of makes me sad for them because it's like, not only are you trying to deal with hygiene school and like all the stress that goes around that and studying, whatever, but now you got these interpersonal relationships that are just causing grief. And
that's too much.
Nobody needs that.
Yeah, it's way too much. It's like there's a couple girls that wanted to study with me. I did take medical terminology because I felt like it would help me in dental hygiene. It was not a requirement, but I want to try to get as much knowledge as I can now.
Mm-hmm.
I took medical terminology and I didn't study with them. And they're like, oh, you want to go study? I'm like, no, it's okay. And I wasn't being rude at all, but I knew that would probably be a challenge for me. So I really wanted to focus on it. But, and like the little, compliments from the instructors, they very much go a long way because I know my medical terminology instructor, absolutely love her. I didn't know, like every girl in there was going for nursing, and I'm like the only one in there that's going for hygiene. And so I was like, we went into the computer lab, we took our exams and stuff. And I was like, I do not think I did well on this final. I am very scared. And I did it. And I was like, I don't remember this. But, when I went up, I was like, okay, are you able to tell us our scores now? Because it was on a computer, or do we have to wait? And she's like, oh, I can tell you now. And she looked at it and she's like, oh my gosh, you made a 91? How did you?
Wow.
Like, I made a 91. I was like,
yeah.
Like, I was just like, oh my gosh. She's like, Tammy, that is very good. You did really well. I'm like, oh my God, thank you. I want to go buy me a shirt now or something. I don't know. It does
Yeah.
a long way when they do compliment you. I was not expecting that. Like my psychology class, I made a 87 on my final. I was not expecting that. And it's like the times when I'm like, I'm not going to do so well, I end up doing really well. And the times that I think, oh, I've got this. I'm like, I made a 75. How did I make a 75 on this? Like, yeah. So, but I have been able to keep my grades up, and that's another thing. I was like, I want to make a 4.0 all the way through school, and that was my plan. But I'm seeing that, in hygiene, I'm not saying that's not possible, but I am seeing that it's a high probability that it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and you know what? That's okay, because your goal isn't to get a 4.0. Your goal is to become a hygienist and become the best clinician you can. Yes. And, like one of my instructors says there are certain aspects of dental hygiene that she didn't even really, like sharpening instruments. She's like, I didn't even really like learn how to do that properly until after hygiene school.
Wow.
And I was like, really? Because we have competencies on those. And it's like, it seems a little unfair that like, mm-hmm. she didn't even learn it until after hygiene school. And we're being like held to this high. But the thing is, like, being held to high standard, it's just going to make you a better clinician. It's going to make you better at what you do. Because there's some people where I feel like the standard isn't as high. And then like, they go into board exams or they go out into the hygiene field and they're like, I don't even know what to do, but like people from my school, like I've heard people who have graduated and they said like, they actually felt like pretty prepared. Like even for board exams, they're like, mm-hmm. wasn't as bad as I was expecting. Yeah. So, yeah.
And the board test timed as well, correct? That's a timed test?
Which one?
The boards exam, is that timed? Like, how does that work?
From what I know, I think the national board exam, from what I understand, you get 8 hours, but most people don't even use the whole 8 hours. They finish way before that. Like, I think a lot of people finish around 4 hours. So, which is nice because it's like, okay, you have 8 hours, but you don't need to use the whole thing.
Yeah.
And like, I'm sure I'll learn about like test taking for board exams and stuff like that down the road. But
Yeah.
yeah. But anyway, yeah, we're running low on time.
Okay.
I'm realizing that this interview has gone way longer than I normally go
Okay.
for. But you know, there's a lot of good information here that I think
Yeah.
some of our listeners, especially those who are not in hygiene school yet, will appreciate.
If you're an assistant, just go for it. You will never know until you actually just try it, you know. And I know I love my patients, you know, and it hurt me to leave because I'm going to miss them. But I make connections with my patient. I don't just see them as another person in the chair, you know. I really do make family with my patients, and that was the hardest thing leaving dental assisting and trying to do hygiene. Is I'm going to miss them, but I know I can just carry that with me into hygiene, you know. So, but thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful, and I hope to do it again when I'm finished with school.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I just want to share with the listeners as well. I mean, the reason why you're being interviewed is because you kind of brought it up when we were chatting on Instagram.
Yeah.
And so, like, I'm open to interviewing other people. I mean, my schedule is quite limited, and I'm not really putting out many episodes right now at all because I'm just so busy. But, you know, we can find a time that works. I mean, we kind of threw this thing together at the last second. So
Yes.
it worked. You know, I don't know when I'll post the interview, but
Okay.
I'll try and get to it.
Whenever you can. I know you're busy.
Yeah.
So,
But,
thank you.
well, thank you for being on the podcast. I mean, I always like hearing from people elsewhere, you know, hearing their experiences. So, I mean, keep listening. I'm sure we'll talk again in the future, get an updated status of where you're at in hygiene school and how it's going so far. So
Yes.
I guess we'll see you in the future.
Thank you so much. You have a wonderful day.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to my dental hygiene school experience. You can find Dach on Instagram and TikTok by searching for dachska.dental. If you have questions for Dach, you can send him a message on Instagram or TikTok, or you can email him at dachskadental@gmail.com. Our host is Dach Ska, and I'm the announcer Nigel, telling you to stay nerdy and brush your teeth.